Greetings, viewers. Eric the Car Guy here, your host for the next hour or so, I suppose. This is a show where I attempt to answer your automotive questions, and this episode is also an AMA, so some other questions may be getting thrown in here. First of all, I want to thank you for watching and joining me today. I will be taking the questions from a forum thread on my website over at EricTheCarGuy.com. There's a link in the description to the YouTube of the YouTube video if you're watching this live on YouTube, where you can head on over and ask a question. Sign up for the website. It's completely free. All you need is an email address, and you can post a question. I will warn you, however, the questions that get posted earlier are the ones that are most likely to get answered. I try to answer as many as I possibly can throughout the course of the show. That being said, you may notice my Honda Element behind me has like some new headlights. Yeah, I picked those up from Motor Fiend and just installed them today. You want to see what they look like? Of course you do. All right, we'll check that out. Here's the parking lights. Yeah, right, cool halo stuff. And then the actual headlights. These are projector beams. These are halogens. High beams, low beams, back to those. Yeah, super cool, right? Yes, I did shoot a video of that. I'm not sure when it will air. I've obviously got a ton of videos to work through right now. But if there's lots of interest in the comments of this YouTube video, well, I'll see if I can fast track it and get it out sooner rather than later. As long as we're on the topic of YouTube comments, I realized during the live show you probably can't post questions to the YouTube section. I will not be answering those because I obviously can't see them. I will be taking them, as I said, from the EricTheCarGuy.com website. So that's where you go. If I don't get to your question tonight, or if you've got questions you really need answers, I would ask that you head over to EricTheCarGuy.com. Still, there's an FAQ page that contains a lot of information that normally helps people that ask me questions. So in other words, FAQ, the most frequently asked questions that I get. I've written extensive articles, added some videos, things like that. Basically, it is an awesome response. Now, I'm going to put on my headphones now just to make sure, but last week, or 2 weeks ago, there were some audio issues, and I apologize for that. I wasn't keeping an eye or an ear on that. Right now, things seem to be fine, and the reason I don't monitor it constantly is because there's a delay in my headphones from what I'm saying, and it's kind of maddening. All right, we've done enough talking, right? So you know the score, you know where I'm getting the questions from. Oh yeah, and I apologize in advance if I butcher your name. It's just a thing with me, dyslexia, whatever you want to call it. Gertie1232 has a BMW 1996 E36 with 2-liter engine, M52B20 automatic. I have an issue where after some driving, when I stop at a traffic light and leave it in drive, the oil pressure lights start to flicker. If I rev the engine a little, it goes away. If I put it in neutral, the light doesn't come on. First time that happened, I stopped the car, checked the oil level. It was about half the level. I topped it off, started the car, and it was all okay. Then for about a month, no problems. Changed the oil and filter, put 10W40. Previous was 5W40. Drove it for a while, and it was okay. Then recently, the problem presented itself again. I stopped the car after a while and checked the oil level. It was okay. Started the car, drove it, and all was good. Might this be due to faulty oil pressure sensor, or what should I check? There is no conditions when this happens. It just happens and then goes away. By the way, the engine has about 260 kilometers on it. 260,000 kilometers on it, I should have said. Thanks in advance. All right, well, I did some research on the type of oil that is required for your engine, and it looks like it's supposed to be 5W40. And you've replaced that with 10W40, which is a thicker viscosity oil. Maybe that's not the proper way to say it, but anyway, the viscosity is going to be different than what you had previously. And in fact, you've exceeded what the vehicle calls for. I don't believe you have a problem with the oil pressure sending unit. I believe basically your engine is worn out, or it could possibly be due to the oil that's too thick that's in there. Oil pressure is actually created by the clearance of all the moving parts in the bottom end for the most part. So in other words, all the clearances between the main bearings and rod bearings and all that kind of stuff is basically where you get your oil pressure from. If you use oil that is too thick, it can't fill that void and create that pressure like it should, especially upon startup, so it could increase wear. And you'll mostly notice these problems at idle. So in other words, as the RPMs drop, the oil pressure will drop with it, possibly low enough to turn on that light, which is what happened. You rev the engine, it went away. You put it neutral, it went away. There's nothing wrong with that sending unit. It's telling you pretty much what you don't want to hear. You can attach a manual oil pressure gauge, in other words, something that's not electronic. I have a video about how to do this and verify the oil pressure. If you see a bouncing needle, which is what I suspect you'll see, it means that oil is slipping past those bearings down below, and that's where your oil pressure is being lost. Now, when you rev the engine, everything is fine, but down at lower speeds, it's starting to become noticeable. Also, 260,000 kilometers. That's quite a few kilometers, so it's got some wear naturally within the engine. So in other words, what I would recommend is you go back to the 5W40 like the manual calls for to start with, and hopefully that helps. If it doesn't help, well, you may be past the point of no return, and at some point, I'm not saying you're going to need to do this tomorrow, but at some point you're going to need to deal with that engine. I recommend replacement over rebuilding, namely because by the time you get done rebuilding something properly, all I've got to do is look at my engine series on Dark Matter Pikachu. It's a lot of effort, it's a lot of time, it's a lot of labor, it's a lot of parts. The DIYer doing it at home, chances of success, not very high that you'll get everything right. And if one little thing is wrong during engine assembly, it all can go wrong. So that's why I recommend replacement over rebuilding. Remanufactured with a warranty is like the best case scenario. The only time I recommend rebuilding is pretty much when it's difficult to find, a hobby car, something that you're just looking to have fun with. But as far as your daily driver getting back and forth to wherever, swap out the engine. I wouldn't bother trying to do any rebuilds or get fancy with it. Unless you've had expensive experience, then you can just ignore me, and then I would wonder why you're watching my show right now. Really? You think I'm that handsome? Thanks. The Bidji, B-I-D-J-I. Quick question, do you have any vague project for the Mustang? The body seems to be in acceptable shape, maybe a budget build, naturally aspirated or supercharged, but then it wouldn't be a budget build anymore. Since you've already got the turbo covered with the Fairmont, or something crazy like an electric car, they seem to be all the rage. It would be fun to experiment and see what you could come up with while going a bit outside of your usual area of expertise. I don't know. I'd hate to see it stay the parts car forever. Whatever the case, thanks for your knowledge you spread. I have absolutely no formal mechanical background. Learned what little I know from getting my hands dirty because my dreams are bigger than my bank account. I hear you, man. But ever since I discovered your channel, I've learned tons of practical and theoretical stuff that helped me dealing with many mechanical issues, projects, and saved me a lot of money. Keep up the great work. Thank you. I never get tired of comments like that of how my work affects people in a positive way. Never get tired of it, so comments away. Now, as for the fate of the Mustang, that's the black car sitting over there behind me. I don't know yet. One project at a time is basically going to be my response to that. And, like I said, one project at a time. The Fairmont still has a significant amount of work to be done before I actually get it up and running. I've got a 3-day shoot scheduled next week with cameraman Brian. The idea is to remove the engine and the front K-member, replace it with a new K-member, replace it with the new front suspension, and get all that stuff done next week. That's the idea anyway. And then after that, I need to take out the interior so I can do the electrics, and then also the dash so I can take care of the HVAC and the gauges, and I'm considering roll cage on top of that. So there's still a significant amount of work to be done on the Fairmont. I've got my fingers crossed to be done by sometime in April. I have my fingers crossed. It's, maybe not what's going to happen, but we'll see. After that's done, I'm going to do a few victory laps, and then I'll think about it. But the Mustang is not my only quote-unquote project. My dad's truck, that is a fantastic platform for a project, something else that's ripe for something new. It's also a truck, it's also a Chevy. These are things that aren't often seen on my channel. So that would also be outside of the norm. I also have the 2001 Acura GSR. That thing would be great for a project car as well. And yeah, I do have thoughts about an electric car at some point, but I'm not ready to talk about that yet. So in other words, I've got lots of plans, lots of aspirations, but literally no time, and a whole stock of videos that I want to put out there, but I can't put out a video every frickin' day. That's just not going to fly. So there's there's a lot there. I appreciate your enthusiasm, and yes, I have considered a budget build on the Mustang because basically all I would need is an engine. I still don't know if the engine block is any good. That's still up at the machine shop where I had Dark Matter Pikachu made. So that may be salvageable. If it is salvageable, then I got a block to start with, if nothing else, and I can build it up from there. However, like small block Fords of that, ilk are not that difficult to find. Got a freshly built T5 transmission, the rear end in that. I don't want to say it's still good. I really don't want to say that because I've been told the spider gears were welded inside there. And whenever I make sharp turns, I can kind of confirm that. I don't know. I mean, I don't want it to go to waste, but at the same time, it's really not at the front of my head. I mean, the Mustang is cool, but I'll have the Fairmont. Gerald. Okay, we'll call you Gerald. That's easier. I've got a 07 F-150 with a 9.75 diff. It started to leak and was wondering whether or not using a gasket instead of RTV was a good idea. I tend to lay things on thick. Also, what do I need to torque the bolts down to? Also, at around 40 to 50 miles per hour, if I slightly give it gas, it feels like the transmission jerks a bit. It's not something that happens frequently, but more like sporadically. I could go all week without it happening. Should I start looking for a new transmission, or would a fluid change fix it? Thanks for the reply, and keep the videos coming. As far as the gasket or RTV, you can go either way, honestly. It's not going to hurt either way. So as long as you torque it to the proper amount, which unfortunately I don't have that information on me. You might want to look up the Ford specs online somewhere. You might even be able to call the parts department at Ford and they might be able to look it up for you. Not sure. I'm pretty sure you can find that answer online somewhere. But I unfortunately don't have that off the top of my head. As far as the transmission jerking, I wouldn't go necessarily looking for a transmission just yet. What I would recommend is a fluid and filter change to see if it helps. If it does, you know it does. If it doesn't, then you know that you might need to dig deeper to find the source of that problem. So, give the fluid filter a change and give that a try, see where that leads you. And if it gets better, awesome. If not, well. And sorry I don't have those torque specs for you. Audi Eric. Good evening, Eric. In my manual Audi, I'm experiencing that the shifter is binding a bit as I'm changing gears. Sometimes I just fail completely to put it in gear and the grinding noise happens. I've checked the gear linkage mechanism for shifter to the transmission and it looks fine, nice and stiff. So if the shifter is being stubborn, could there be a problem with the selector mechanism inside the transmission, or could it be that the clutch is bad if the gear linkage mechanism is fine? I guess this stuff happens pretty much all old manual vehicles. Mine is a 98 model that has around 110,000 miles on it. Anyway, it makes quick acceleration much more difficult than it would if it was pristine. Your thoughts? Many thanks. Okay, you already alluded to what could possibly be the problem, which is the clutch. If the clutch is not disengaging the transmission from the engine, it's still spinning. So it's like trying to change gears while the clutch is still engaged and the engine is running. So yes, a clutch that is worn out can cause difficult engagement. The other thing is the linkage, which you say you've already checked. Another thing beyond that is the actual fluid. Some vehicles, and German vehicles sort of fall into this category quite often, require special fluid for their transmissions and periodic fluid changes. If you haven't had a fluid change in a very long time, I'd recommend that you have that fluid change, or you change the fluid and then see if the problem persists. Now you can check to see if your clutch is slipping. I've done a video about this. I put it in like second gear and rev it up to like 3 grand and try to, let's see, what would be a good way to do this? Sometimes what I do is I just have it in like second gear and I just leave the parking brake on and I try to take off. And if it stalls the engine, then I know that the clutch is good. But if it doesn't stall the engine and the engine keeps revving even though the clutch is engaged, then I'm fairly certain that there's a problem with the clutch being worn out. So that's a possibility. And clutches normally start to slip in higher gears. So in other words, like when you're in 5th gear, if the RPMs seem a little higher than usual, or the highest gear, you might have one higher or lower than that. So if you're in a high gear and you're going down the highway and you like mash down the gas and you see the RPMs like rev up a little bit and then slowly come back down, that's pretty much a telltale sign that your clutch is slipping. So could be your clutch, could be the fluid. I change the fluid, and if that doesn't help, change the clutch. However, I always change the fluid when I change the clutch because I'm taking the transmission out anyway. So you might want to see about that clutch first, come to think of it. So clutch or fluid is where I would start with that. I wouldn't condemn the inside of the transmission just yet. RPG 99, hey Eric, love the Fairmont project and wish you all the success to finish it from the UK. Hello UK. You really have helped me loads as an aspiring vehicle technician at 17 years old. I really hope you see this. But anyway, I have a 2012 VW Polo, and basically anytime I use power in the car, like using the electric windows, the AC, and especially when I turn the steering wheel, the headlights dim by quite a bit. My first thoughts were obviously alternator failing and battery, but instead I took it to a trusted garage and they said it was my power steering pump that had broken, and a new one would cost me nearly 600 pounds. As you can tell, I didn't do that. They also said the battery, the person who previously owned the car, was the wrong one, and even though they put the right one in, it made no difference. Recently, I have noticed the steering has gone a bit heavier, and on one occasion it sort of jammed, but once again, I'm not sure. I was wondering if you had ever experienced this on a car, and do you think the problem, and what do you think the problem could be? Once again, thank you so much for your awesome videos. You know, I never get tired of hearing how the work that I do inspires people in positive ways. Awesome. And good on you for being an automotive technician. As to your problem, it seems to me that the engine is idling low. And that could be due to, as the garage stated, that the power steering pump is failing. I'm not familiar with that exact vehicle. And it being a 2012, I would be surprised if it had a separate belt for the power steering. But if it does have a separate belt for the power steering, remove that belt and see if the problem goes away. And also you might consider just removing the serpentine belt if there's one that goes around everything. Removing that belt and trying to turn the power steering pump by hand. If it's difficult to do, it could be putting too much of a load on the engine, therefore it's not spinning the alternator fast enough to work properly. So this is what I'm getting at. So it could be bringing the idle of the engine down to the point where it's not able to spin the alternator enough to produce enough power to run the vehicle. And therefore you have all these other issues. Also check your battery connections, not just the battery itself, but also the battery connections, make sure they're good. I also have a video about how to check alternator output. That's probably not a bad idea. However, that test might not be valid or if you have another problem, say a power steering pump that's causing an additional load on the engine. Also, fuel economy would be affected in that instance as well. So, you might have to deal with that power steering pump, and instead of buying a new or refurbished one, you might consider getting one out of salvage. I'm not sure what the salvage situation is in the UK, but it's something that saves people a lot of money here in the States. So in other words, a used part could be the answer to your problems. But I would give that a try and see where it leads you. Delta V, what would cause violent shuddering when accelerating more than 50% pedal travel, 15% pedal travel? We're talking space shuttle launch type shuddering. Never fails to start, never stalls, no codes, fuel pressure indicates fine at idle and when revving from a stop. Not checked while driving. New OEM fuel filter installed. Could this still be a fuel issue when the engine is under a sudden load or ignition leads mobile breaking down? Thanks for your help as always. Stay awesome. Thank you. Well, here's an issue I have with your question. You didn't tell me what kind of vehicle you got. So that makes it kind of difficult. In my experience, engine vibrations under engine acceleration or engine performance problems under acceleration or under load, a lot of times I trace that back to the ignition system. In other words, like leaking wires or bad spark plugs, or somehow the ignition events aren't happening properly. There's also the possibility that you have a problem with the transmission. There's also the possibility that you have a problem with the final drive. There's also a possibility that you have a problem with an axle. But know this, most of the time, vibrations are caused by rotating assemblies. So in other words, don't go looking for loose suspension parts necessarily, because they can make vibrations worse, but they are normally not the cause. So vibrations are often caused by rotating assemblies. This could be, inside the transmission, the final drive, the drive shafts, all those things like I said. But look at engine performance first. It sounds like you've really looked over the fuel system and tried to eliminate that as a possible cause, and it doesn't sound like that's necessarily the issue. I would look at the ignition system, look for vacuum leaks, that type of thing. In fact, after the show's over, I'll link in the description to the engine performance section of the FAQ that I wrote. I go over step by step of how to solve engine performance issues and also vibration issues. I've got another one on that as well. So there's lots of information that will be available to you that I hope can be helpful. IG Storm Chaser. Yeah, cool. I got that right. Hey Eric, I have a 98 C1500 with the Vortec 350. I have an issue with my front tires wearing on the outermost edge. When I turn the wheels hard over, the front of the truck kind of hops from side to side. I don't see any obvious broken suspension parts, and I have had it aligned, but it made no difference. I've replaced all tie rods and ball joints previously. It seems there is too much camber while turning, but I could be wrong. Good luck with Oliver and stay dirty. To be honest, I have the same thing on my C1500. The outer edges of all the tires are worn, and it might just be a characteristic of the vehicle. As far as camber, you want it to camber in, depending upon what side we're talking about. You want it to camber in on the, let's see, basically think of it like you're putting your arms out, like this. So if you're turning left, you want it to camber in on the left. So yeah, so to go negative camber, so the top of the tire would go in, and then the other side may go out, which could be that outer edge that you're talking about. It could just be the weight of the truck. Like a truck's got some weight to it, so as you're slinging it around corners, outer edges of tires are going to wear more. So maybe rotate your tires more frequently. You've already had it aligned, and that's pretty much going to tell you if there is suspension components that are out of alignment that could cause abnormal tire wear. However, I will say this, to align it with tires that are already worn doesn't really give you much. The best time to align something is when you have brand new tires on. But that's not always possible. But you know, like I said, my C1500 that's only 8 years younger than yours seems to do the same thing. So it might be something that's just a characteristic of the vehicle. Also, the type of tires that you're using. Cheaper tires tend to wear a little differently. You know, better tires tend to wear a little better. So it's like I said, it may be normal. Saturn Sam. I just wanted to say thanks for your help with the 95 Ford F-150, and I would like to know what would be your favorite car that you saw at the auction. Thanks for all the great videos. They have helped me a lot and saved me hundreds of dollars. Keep up the great work. Thank you, Saturn Sam. Favorite car at the auction? That is a difficult one. I mean, as I said in the video, he's referring to, I just recently went to Barrett-Jackson a couple of weeks ago, and it was amazing. And it was the coolest car show I've ever been to, like hands down. In fact, I'll link the video in the description so those of you that hadn't seen some of that footage can see some of that footage. One of the things that struck me so much about that auction is, you know, I've been to lots of car shows and you see lots of cool cars. You see clean cars, you see, you know, cars that are half built, that type of thing. But Barrett-Jackson has like the rare cars. Like these are the collectible cars. You know why these cars are there. So I mean, I saw more Cobra Jets in one place than I've ever seen. I mean, you never see 428 Cobra Jets like out in the wild, so to speak. They're very rare. And in fact, you know, GT 500 KRs, which KRs are king of the road, you don't see them. You know, those are some of the Fords. And then Oldsmobile 442, that was really hot. But you know what? I go back to like I think it was a 65 or 66 Ford Fairlane 500. There was like $7,000. I mean, that seems attainable. That seems reachable. And it was clean. It was beautiful. It was like that Robin Zeb blue that Ford did. You know, that car stuck with me. I mean, those other cars were great, like I said, but you know, those are things like, I don't have 150, 200 grand. And what would I do with a car that was worth that much? I mean, I'd want to drive it, but I'd be like, no. I'd be afraid to drive it. No, I want something I can drive. And you know, people get on my case about the bodywork on Oliver like that. I'm like, I want to drive it. You know, if I spend all my time polishing the thing or getting the thing all prepped out and looking pretty, I'm not going to want to mess it up. If it's just ugly, I'll just drive it. So I like cars I can drive. I like, you know, stuff like that. So let's say that Fairlane 500, that's 65 or 66. I don't know what year it was. We'll call it that one. That, I believe, is also listed in that video, which I'll link in the description after all this is said and done. K Bidwell 2. has a 92 Chevy 305 that doesn't heat up. The temperature gauge only reaches about 135, 140 degrees, and then heat coming from the air vents is lukewarm. The water pump and T-stat were replaced a couple of years ago, and I thought that could be the reason it wasn't getting any heat. I removed the 195 degree T-stat and checked it in a pot of water, and it worked just fine. Reinstalled it and bled the cooling system as per your instructions, but it didn't get any better. I'm perplexed as to where the engine heat is going, and I'm wondering what to do next. Thank you for your videos. I've learned a lot from them. You're welcome, and thank you for that comment. That's a good one. I like it because, I mean, you've covered the bases. Like the impeller on the water pump could have been rusted out or something like that and not moving enough coolant through the system, although that often causes like these weird overheats when that happens, like when you're driving down the highway and it overheats. That's like a strange overheat, and that could be like coolant flow problem. But you have just the opposite. It's not heating up. And that says thermostat, but you've changed it and you've verified its operation. So yeah, that's kind of a head scratcher. 195, I believe, is the exact temperature that engine is supposed to have. So it's it leaves me scratching my head, like what the heck is going on here? Like why is the thing either not like really super overheating? Why is it staying cool? That's just like, the only thing that I can go back to is like, is that a thermostatic fan clutch? In other words, the cooling fan that's coming off the front of the engine, probably be bolted to the front of the water pump, is that like locked in all the time, like a straight fan? Is it like pulling air all the time? Because thermostatic fans have a viscous clutch on the inside of them. And as they heat up, they engage and pull more air through the radiator. That's how it's supposed to work. And then during times when, you know, there isn't a lot of airflow needed through the radiator, it loosens up and it doesn't freewheel, but it doesn't pull the same amount of air through the radiator. So a part of me is wondering, and it's a 92, so I'm pretty sure it doesn't have an electric fan or anything like that. I'm wondering if that fan is constantly pulling air through that radiator, is the only thing I've come down to. I mean, this is something I honestly want to get my hands on, literally get my hands on, and feel the upper and lower radiator hoses. The upper hose should be the hot one. There should be hot water coming out of that because that's what's going into the radiator. And the lower hose should be cool, going back to the engine. So if your upper radiator hose is cool, that says thermostat. It really does, but you've checked it. So once again, scratching my head, like what the heck is going on here? I'm stumped. I will honestly admit I'm stumped because, you know, you've covered your bases and you've done well by doing so. The only thing I can go back to is maybe it's the wrong water pump, maybe it's a reverse flow. I'm just grasping at straws here. I really am stumped by your question. So good on you for stumping the chump. However that works out. Let's see. Wow, usually, oh yes. I was like, usually we have some more pages of questions that have come in by now. We're about halfway through the show. And because I initially started out with 2 pages, and as soon as I refreshed and went to the other page, suddenly there's 4 pages of questions. So that means Eric needs to answer questions quickly. Roy789 has a 2003 Mitsubishi Lancer, and he hears a slight noise, sort of a tack when he first starts the vehicle. After I drive it, this sound goes away. It only happens during the first startup in the morning. Any idea of what it might be? Well, going back to the earlier BMW question about there being a flashing oil light, similar problem. I mean, if you're putting oil that's thicker than what's called for, especially on startup, that oil is going to be thicker and it's going to take longer to reach the top end of the engine. And a lot of times what you'll hear is like the lifters and the valve train making a bunch of noise until it gets oil. So that's kind of what sounds like what's happening. So it could be that you have an engine that's worn to the point where you're getting that upon startup, or it could be that the oil you're using is too thick. Know that that's going to increase wear, and putting thinner oil back in could exacerbate the problem. So it's hard to say. Synthetics could make it even worse than that. So it's kind of one of those catch-22 situations, but it sounds like worn engine parts. Make sure you're using the correct engine oil. Mets fan 67, love your channel and your videos. I'm currently a mechanical engineering student and always watch your videos to learn more about cars and learn more about how to repair my own. I have a 2004 Acura TL and know they have issues with transmissions. I was looking into buying a transmission cooler for it to try and extend the life of the trans. What do you think about that? Will it help? The car has 107,000 miles on it, and so far so good with the transmission. Anyways, stay on top of the fluid as well. Let me know what you think. I was also told Honda built a cooling heating unit for the fluid at the factory. It looks like a hockey puck. Do you know anything about that? Keep up the good work, and thanks again. Well, thank you for your comments, Joe. I'm very familiar with that vehicle, but it really does not fall within the years of TLs that were the real problem. The real problem TLs were from 99 to 03. Acura TLs and CLs from 1999 to 03. Avoid them like the plague. That's like my least favorite Honda ever. It's an embarrassment to the brand to me. You know, that's just my opinion. There were nothing but problems with those cars, including transmissions on top of transmissions. In 2004, however, they redesigned TL and along with it, the transmission for the most part. Now, there were still some problems with that transmission up through 07. Some, but not nearly on the scale that it was from 99 to 03. The hockey puck you're referring to is the transmission cooler, but Honda doesn't call it a transmission cooler. They call it a transmission warmer, which is odd. And, you know, the real problem with the transmissions is this. It's a problem with the case. What happens is the feed tubes that go into the case either cracks or they become loose and they bleed off pressure to second gear clutch. When that happens, the second gear clutch does not engage fully and it burns up. And that's normally what fails inside those transmissions. It's second gear. In fact, we had a whole thing that Honda was making us do for a while of taking pictures of the second gear and all that kind of stuff. We had an update where we we ran a hose back down into the fill hole so that it bathed second gear in transmission fluid to try to help cool it down, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, you do not necessarily fall under the problem transmissions that's a long way of saying what I just said. What I'd recommend for you is regular transmission fluid changes about every 30,000 miles with Honda DW1 fluid. And that should be good. It's just 3 quarts. So another drain refill. There's no filter to replace. It's internal inside the transmission. A transmission cooler, external cooler, will not hurt. Okay, it won't hurt. But I don't think it'll make a difference if it's one of the problem transmissions, because like I said, it's a design flaw inside the transmission itself. So if it's going to go, it's going to go. Transmission cooler, like I said, that can't hurt you, but at the same time, I'm asking myself, is it going to be worth it? Because I'm not exactly sure where you'd be hooking that up since, like I said, they don't have external transmission lines coming out to the radiator on that. They just have a couple of coolant lines going to that hockey puck on top of the transmission right down underneath the throttle body. That's where that lives. So give that a try. See what happens. And good luck, and thank you again for your comments. Mod Motor 70, longtime viewer, follower, first-time poster. Hey, has a 1990 Mustang 5.0 that I've been fixing up. I did the fuel sender, pump, and filter the weekend before you posted the how to do that. I just recently posted a video on removing and replacing the fuel tank in a Fox body, which that is a Fox body, that Mustang he has there. I've now been working and fixing some vacuum leaks that seem to be causing the car to run super rich. I've got some smoke from the exhaust and a strong fuel smell from the exhaust as well. She stumbles at wide open throttle as well and spits fuel-smelling smoke. I have a few codes that are showing the thermactor system is disconnected. Would this cause it to run rich? Here's a video. Well, I'm not going to play the video because I can't share with the class, but what you're describing, okay, sounds like it's running rich, and just from seeing the thumbnail of the video, I see some white smoke that looks like it's running rich. There's a few things that can cause this. Minus check engine light codes, and one of those things is like possibly a leaking fuel injector. You can check for this by hooking up a fuel pressure gauge, and you can start and run the engine if you want. Start and run the engine, but then shut it off and pinch up. Sorry. Ooh. I've been talking too much. Pinch off the return line. So that basically, oh, you know what? You can pinch off the return and the supply line after you shut it off. And this will isolate the fuel injectors on the engine. And if you see fuel pressure start to bleed down, you know you got a leaking fuel injector. And probably the easiest way to find it is to pull plugs. In fact, you might even start with that. You might pull all the plugs and take a look at them. And if you've got a plug that's like really clean or like really black, that's a different color than the rest of them, that's your problem cylinder. So it could also be ignition related, because sometimes ignition problems can cause this type of problem as well. So really, you're going to have to run down the checklist of engine performance stuff. And I've got that whole checklist over at the FAQ section, and away we go. We can do it that way. I need to cough. I bet that was weird seeing me do that without any sound. Anyway, yeah, something's bugging me in there. But I'm going to recommend to you that you go over and follow the performance diagnosis. It also has videos on how to find vacuum leaks. Vacuum leaks can also cause that. Coolant temperature sensors that aren't quite right can cause that. You know, there's so many things. It's a very long list of things that can cause your vehicle to run rich and have a problem like that. Ugh. Okay. I hope I don't have to cut this short, because that came up awful sudden like. I will soldier on. JTK-M. I have an Olds 307 V8 engine in my project Chevy that I'm about to place the intake manifold back on with a new gasket. What is your opinion? Should I use silicone along with a new gasket, or rely just on the metal gasket to seal properly? Second question, I have an old Chevy pickup with a huge 6.5 liter naturally aspirated diesel V8 engine. Is there any way to check the timing change slack without taking the timing cover off? I know you have a video for this, but the method only works for gasoline engines. Just want to thank you for your work. You motivate me to work on my project car and learn and study more about cars and correct methods to work on them. By the way, the Finland episode was very cool and fun to watch, because I'm from Finland and the places in the video are familiar. That is awesome. I loved Finland. Absolutely love Finland. And I've got more video in there somewhere that I'm meaning to get to. It's just, oh gosh, work. All right, now, enough about my problems. Let's talk about yours. Intake manifold. What I recommend is just let the gasket do the work. However, on those corners, so you've got each side of the engine in the valley. So here's the V. Here's all the intake ports on the cylinder head on one side and on the other side. And then you've got a gasket that lays in there. There's another cork gasket that goes down along the top of the block, and one along the back over by where the distributor is. So there's like these little cork gaskets normally, or sometimes they're neoprene or rubber or something like that. Where you want to put the RTV is in the corners where the gaskets meet. So in the front, like where that cork comes and comes into contact with the other side of the intake gasket, right there in that corner, put some RTV there. Do the same thing in the back. But don't smear the RTV all over the gasket and then slap the gasket onto the engine. No, don't do that. As for the diesel and checking for timing chain slack, you know, you got me on that one, because with a gasoline engine, as you pointed out, you've got a distributor and you can look at the distributor and away you go. But on a diesel, that's a different animal altogether. You may end up having to take the timing cover off and get a look. That may be the only way to truly know, and that may be based on mileage. You might be able to do some research and find out if there's some information out there somewhere that can give you the information you need on how to find out if you've got excessive slack in that engine. But I'm at a loss right now, and I apologize for that. So thank you for your comments, and I must move on to answer more questions. The Blukes, I think I said that right, Bukes. Hey Eric, cleaning the engine bay. I want to clean the engine bay in my Holden Statesman, but not sure how the best way to go about it without drowning things. I've seen many people use degreasers, then power washers to spray the engine bay, and it seems to go okay. What are your thoughts and or tips? Love the truck and the little thing behind you called Oliver. Thank you. Yeah, I'm quite fond of Oliver myself. And the truck. Love my dad's truck. Love that truck. Okay. I get asked this from time to time, and I always start by saying I'm not a fan of washing engines. I'm just not. I mean, some people are into it, you know, get rid of the grease, it's easier to work on, and you find leaks easier. I mean, there's a lot of pros to it. And the diesel people, they do it all the time. But they don't have an ignition system to worry about. And that's mainly what ends up being the problem. It's so subjective, this question, because some people go about it like all gung-ho, and they've got a pressure washer like this far away from a sensor and are basically blasting it to pieces. And then other people are doing it more sensibly. So, and I'm not saying you fall into the category of, you know, one of those yahoos just going to jump in. Like I said, I've never really been a fan of it because I've seen so many problems caused after the fact. However, I do understand the desire to do it. So I think, therefore, I need to just do a video. I need to do a video and experiment for myself and just try it, just see. Like you said, just spray it down with the greaser and then hit it with a pressure washer. See what happens. Outside of that, I don't know. I don't know, man. Like I said, that's such a tough call. Very subjective. And I always have difficulty answering that question. So it's not you, it's me. Newhall. Hey, Eric, I love your videos. 2005 Chevy Malibu with a 3.5 V6. It has ran good ever since I bought it 2 years ago, but occasionally when I go to start it, it either doesn't start or sputters and dies. There are no codes that my reader picked up, but there is a heavy gas smell when it occurs. Any ideas what could be going on? First thing that comes to mind on that engine is like a crank sensor, like not sending a signal for the ignition, but it would seem weird that it would not fire the ignition, but yet give you fuel pulses from the injectors. So that's a bit confusing. Without any codes, it's you gotta. I start with the basics. Check the plugs, and if you see anything, you know what? These are tough. These are tough because they're intermittent. If it happens all the time, you say occasionally, but occasionally when you go to start it, and that's an intermittent failure, and that's like one of the things that drives us technicians just bonkers, because you bring it to us and everything's fine. It doesn't act up at all. But the second you drive off the lot, you call me up and you're like, hey, it did it again. And you get it to the shop and then it's not doing it. It's so frustrating. But when faced with that, I just try to check the usual suspects. One of the things I've done is I've actually hooked fuel pressure gauges up to the engine and taped them to the windshield, just so that it's on there all the time, so I can monitor fuel pressure all the time, so I can see, hey, the fuel pressure spiked or it dropped or something went awry there. Also, if you have a sophisticated enough scan tool, this is a 2005, so it's new enough to where you probably get some significant information with a scanner that could help find events. Like if there was a problem with an ignition event or something like that, it can log that. And so you can get a look at all the sensors and what they're seeing and maybe see one that drops out, like I say, a crank sensor or something like that suddenly drops out for a second and then might pop back up. So it's, like I said, these intermittent problems are a real pain, but your friend is your diagnostic equipment. Like I said, a scan tool that can read live data and also record if you're having an event like this. So in other words, if you have the scanner plugged in every time you start it up, you're having a problem, hit record, and it'll record all the data for that event. And then you look at that data and then find out, this is anomalous, this isn't something the way it shouldn't be, this is where I'm going to look for the problem. And like I said, with the fuel pressure, that's also helpful. Excuse me, sorry about that. All right, we're getting to a point where I'm about to get random on it. Jonesy, 1886, my name is Josh, and I met you at the very awesome meetup last July. Hi again, Josh. Any advice for an entry-level tech with job interviews to move beyond entry-level 20-hour work weeks? I have lots of side work, shade tree type of experience, alternator starters, brake jobs, etc., but only 9 months in a shop, Walmart Auto Care Center, just doing oil changes and tire work, and have most of my own basic tools, self-taught, lots of your videos, and my ASE book. I'm sick of being broke. I get it, and in fact, that's one of the reasons why I became a mechanic in the first place, because I was the guy making the fries at Wendy's. I was the guy putting chickens on spits at Boston Chicken before it was Boston Market. You know, I was the guy. House painting was fun just because of the guys I work with, but I don't like heights, and I was always up on the dormers painting stuff on slate roofs. That wasn't for me. So enough about me, and how about you? All right, well, really, and I say this a lot, and I probably said this to you at the meetup if you were asking me for advice, automotive education is going to take you far. Other than that, you're doomed to be in this level of technician status for the most part, unless you get really lucky and find the right shop that's going to mentor you on your way up. I don't see that happen at Walmart Auto Care Center, if I'm honest. This is where an automotive education separates the men from the boys, because you're worth more money. Also, a lot of that time counts towards your ASC certification. And the more ASC certification you have when looking for a job, that's going to help you get a job, and that's going to help you get paid more. Now, a lot of people say ASC is BS, blah, blah, blah. You know, I have to agree with them. In some ways it is, but it does show effort. It does show your effort to better yourself and for your career and your craft. And that to me says something. So if I've got, you know, a folder full of, not even that, if I'm looking at job applications and I see somebody with like nothing but 9 months of experience at Walmart Auto Care Center, and I see somebody fresh out of school, who am I going to hire? You know, even if the person fresh out of school does not have any ASC certifications, they may be well on their road to doing that. And as a result, they would be, in my opinion, a better hire than somebody who just says, hey, I've got tools, I can do this. So you're limiting yourself by, you know, not having that education behind you. And I know it's tough. I mean, it was tough for me too. But I stuck with it. It was 18 months later, I ended up with a career that led me here. So it takes a while, but it sounds like you got some time, and that I would seriously consider an automotive education. Otherwise, you're just somebody who's turning a wrench. If, you know, in diagnostics, like be a scanner danner. Get into diagnostics, learn your diagnostics, learn your electronics. South Main Auto is also really good with his diagnostics as well. Those are the people that are going to do well. If you're just changing brakes and tires, that's what you'll be doing. And you can get good at that. And I'm not saying we don't need brake and tire changes, because we do need them. And it's hard to find good ones. But the guys that make the bank in this industry are the guys that are doing the diagnostic stuff. And one more thing I'll throw out at you. If you are going to go to school, consider diesel. Diesel's worth a lot more money these days than auto repair. I mean, diesel's a whole different world in a lot of ways. Now, you may be working second or third shift if you get into diesel, but you will get paid more money, and I'm fairly certain it's going to be a better career than automotive right now. Just throwing that out there. All right, Cheese Bear 97. I see he's got a picture of a cheese bear. Interesting. 99 Buick Regal 3800 with a turbo. Wait, 38 Regal with a 3800 turbo. I have a 99 Buick Regal is with a 3800 turbo. Confused. I'm wondering, because I know they had superchargers, but all right. I'm wondering what are some easy things I can do to gain better acceleration. It already has a K&N air and oil filter with full synthetic oil. Also has new Bosch spark plugs. I have knowledge on cars but don't want to do anything really hard. Any recommendations? First thing I'd recommend is get rid of those Bosch plugs and put the AC Delcos back in. Just saying. Second thing, easiest way to make a car go fast, easiest way, lighten it up. Get rid of weight. Go to the gym, work out. Yeah, that's me. Once again, talking about myself. Now, get rid of weight, as much weight as you possibly can. I mean, that's really what it boils down to. It's power to weight ratio. So the less a car weighs, the easier it is for the engine to work and do its job. I'm talking like take the back seat out. Just whatever you can. You empty out your trunk, do whatever. Like lighten that thing up. And that is your quickest way to better performance. The other thing I always say this is tires. You will never get more bang for your buck than you will out of a good set of tires. Like find the best set of tires you can for that car and you will love it so much more. It'll be so much more fun to drive. It'll get better fuel mileage. It'll be quieter. That's where you put your money. Put your money in tires. You'll never go wrong by doing that. That's the direction that I would go. All right. Platsy 89, hope you are doing good. 97 Silverado 5.7. I'm incredibly frustrated with this truck. I top off the radiator and reservoir. A week later, both are low. I've done every test under the sun and checked all the hoses. Any advice would be helpful. Thank you. Stay dirty. P.S. Dark Matter Pikachu is badass. Yes, it is. Thank you for saying that. Okay. I'm just going to cut to the chase on this one. Kind of famous for intake gasket leaks that you may not be able to see. It may be leaking down into the lifter valley. So pull the oil cap, look for milky oil. If you see milky oil, could be that intake gasket is leaking. Also the pressure test. I mean, you say you've done every test under the sun, but have you done a pressure test to see if the pressure leaks off over time? Because if it does leak off over time, you know you have a leak somewhere. You may not be able to see it, but you know you have a leak somewhere. So that's one of my favorite tests. In fact, I've got a whole list of things to run through with coolant leaks or just leaks in general. That's also over at the FAQ page. So that's where I would go with that. Starting with the intake manifold is what I would look at. Similar to what they have on the V6s. Excuse me, sorry about that. All right, Jason Bird 0927. Thanks in advance. Thanks for the advice on the film gear from the last AMA. You're welcome. My daily driver, 2012 Honda Civic LX5 speed manual, and it's got 226,000 miles on the original motor and tranny. I bought it brand new in 2011, and I love this car because it's been so dependable and also because of all the memories I've had with my family in this car. Unfortunately, it hasn't been shifting well so lately, so my issue is with third and fifth gear. The car won't let me shift into fifth from fourth without double clutching, and it won't let me go from third to fourth if I don't rev match pushing it into third. Usually rev match and shift at the same time. Since the shifting issue seems to happen whether I'm shifting from fourth gear, does it mean there's something wrong with my fourth gear synchro? Also, the clutch and tranny fluid were replaced at the Honda dealership about 40,000 miles ago, if that helps at all. Okay, I'm going to assume that since you've had this vehicle for a while that you know how to drive it and you're not burning up the clutch, because I've seen people burn up clutches in 10,000 miles. Actually, 7,000 miles, I think, was the record that I saw. So, and as I mentioned earlier about the difficult shifting, the gentleman earlier was talking about the same thing. Clutch is usually often a cause of something like that. And Hondas in particular, what happens with them is the springs fall out of the clutch disc and they cause an intermittent difficult shifting, like the clutch won't disengage. So the spring pops out and gets caught between the fingers of the pressure plate and the clutch disc. So when you go to try and disengage the clutch, what happens is that spring jams in between everything. Now, you said the clutch and the transmission fluid were replaced at the Honda dealership, so that tells me it should have the correct fluid in it, Honda fluid, because Hondas are weird that way. If you don't put the right fluid in them, they tend to complain. So, with all that being said, you're left with two things. A problem with the linkage, which is, the connections between your shifter and the transmission, which I think on that one is going to be some cables. It could be, I just had this thought, especially if this was happening after you had the clutch replaced, that they didn't install those cables up back on the transmission correctly and they're out of adjustment. And especially because you're talking about the higher gears, like your fourth and fifth and your thirds. So that may be one of those cables that's not adjusted correctly that's causing that problem. Usually what I do is I avoid messing with those cables at all. I just remove them as an assembly, but if they take them out of their holders, they could put them out of adjustment when they reinstall them. So it really just depends on who did that clutch job and how experienced they were and their methods. So it could be, like I say, a connection between shifter and transmission, or like you say, it could be a problem with the synchros themselves. So that is also a possibility. Now, sorry about my runny nose. Let's get all random. We got about 10 minutes. So I'm going to just spin through the most recently posted questions. Let's see. Edwin Bonnell. Good evening, Eric. I was wondering if you would know what to do. My Mazda Protege 99 DX 1.6 liter. My problem is I get a random misfire. I pop the hood and wiggle the ignition coil pack. In general, that fixes it for a time. Then it happens again. What should I do? Well, hard to say what's going on there. That's a little strange. When you wiggle the ignition coil pack, it generally fixes it. Possibly a ground problem. You know what I would try? I would try like spraying it with some water to see if you see any arcing with those wires or anything coming off of that coil pack. And if you do, you might just be as simple as replacing some ignition wires or something like that. I do have a video about this that I will post in the description post show to possibly give you some insight into how to deal with that. Craig UK has a, excuse me, I have a 1.4 liter turbo Vauxhall Opel Corsa, and it seems to be idling very rough. I don't have to be inside the car and it will start revving. It's only 2 years old. Full service each year, and it's had both oxygen sensors changed. Any ideas? Thanks in advance. Keep the videos coming. Okay, rough idle or idling rough. Let's see. Seems to be idling very rough. Okay, whenever I run into idle problems, and I've written extensively about this on this website also, first thing I go after is engine performance. So I check the plugs, I check for vacuum leaks, I check to make sure that the engine is running as good as it possibly can. And that usually eliminates about 85% of the problems. Now, after that, I start looking at things like engine mounts. So engine mounts are low on my list of things to look at, but engine mounts can contribute to rough idle, especially if they're oil soaked. Maybe you got an oil leak and soak the rubber, and that rubber tends to deteriorate quite quickly if it gets soaked with oil. That could be a possibility. Some engine mounts are vacuum operated, so if that vacuum actuator on the inside of the engine mount fails, that can cause a problem. I don't know if that vehicle has those or not, but like I said, engine performance first, then look to engine mounts, and that could possibly be the problem. So hopefully that gives you some insight on where to look. Ooh, McKinnick, anyway, McKickle 98. Hello from Scotland, long-time subscriber. Hello, Scotland. My question, I'm just going to call you that, Scotland, because I can't say the name. Bought a 2004 Rover 75 2-liter diesel auto with 120,000 miles. Everyone is telling me that the head gasket will fail because of the design quality. Is there anything I can do to prevent this from happening? There seems to be no signs at the moment of head gasket failure. Well, a lot of people say a lot of things, especially when you get a vehicle they might be jealous of. Take my Fairmont, for instance. And I can't really say one way or another whether that is prone to that. I mean, I don't see too many Rover diesels over here in the States, so I really couldn't say that, that's a continuing problem on that or not. Monitor, keep an eye on your coolant level, keep an eye on your temperature, make sure it doesn't overheat. Do regular oil changes, and that usually helps extend the life of just about any vehicle, just about any of them. Just regular service, easy stuff. It's not rocket science, but if it is prone to that, I don't know if there's anything you could do. I'm not a fan of stop leak. I'm just putting that out there. In other words, it's stuff that you put in your cooling system that seals up any leaks. Not really a fan of that. However, it can work if used properly. So if you do decide to go that route, make sure you follow the directions to the letter. Like I said, I'm not a fan. I like to fix things over, mechanic at a can, but sometimes it works out. Sometimes. All right. This one stuck out. Jetliner. Howdy, Eric. Hope you make it this far. So there's real hope there. I've been working at a dealership for a few months now. It's my first time working in a dealership environment, and being the new guy, I get the usual jabs as new guys get. However, I wanted to know if you had any tips to keep myself on everyone's nice list. I know you've made a couple of videos about your dealership experience, and everything you said I can easily see and relate to. You do a great job of explaining it. Basically, I've noticed the best thing to do is to keep your head down, get your work done, and try to avoid most of the other people. It seems to be a good tactic so far. Does that mean my whole employment should assume if I'm not being talked to, I'm doing okay, haha, sort of a no news is good news type of place? Thanks, man. I'm always thrilled and enjoy more and more of your content. Thank you very much for those comments. It's funny, I have made a video about this exact thing, and you got it. I mean, you literally have it. And as far as what you do in a dealership situation is you prove yourself over time. You prove your value over time. You maybe stay late on that Saturday or whatever, so-and-so can go home and do what they've got to do. Especially if you're young and you don't have a family or anything yet, just go for it. Just, a dealership is a place where you can do well financially. And if you're on certain people's good sides, that can be an even easier thing. When I say that, I mean the right salespeople, the right service writer, you'll learn. But I think you're correct, and this is what I said in that video. I basically pretty much don't talk, just work. Do your work. Let the work speak for you. Don't you speak for you. Just let the work speak for you, because mechanics are like that. My wife is a hairdresser, and I swear that working in an auto mechanic shop was as bad, if not worse, than working in a hair salon. And I'm not kidding when I say that. As far as the amount of gossip and BS and all the other stuff, all the politics. I'm very happy not to be in that environment anymore, at least the place where I work. Not all dealerships are bad. I've actually run into some dealerships in the not too distant past that are really good. So it is possible to find a good dealership. But the one that I worked at, no, far from it. Although the money was good for a time, so I can say that. And some of the people there were really cool. Some of the people there, I don't miss them. But others, yeah, some of those people I really do miss. All right, time for a couple more random ones. We'll go to the last page and see if we can't help somebody that just tuned in, because that's usually the way I try and do these things. In fact, we'll go to the very last page and see what we have, and then work our way back from there until the end of the show. Here we go. Last question posted. Jumbe, hey Eric, have you ever heard of the Acura CSX Type S? What are your opinions on that? Well, I have heard of it, but I've never driven it or have no experience with it, working on anything. So I got nothing. So I don't have opinions on things I don't have experience with. Chris P, 07 Jeep Liberty, knocking from front passenger side, only in four-wheel drive. I suspect the CV axle or inner midshaft. Could this be because the axle only gets enough torque in four-wheel drive to make the noise? Okay, so passenger side, only in four-wheel drive. So yes, it could be exactly that. Hard to say exactly what it is. I do have a FAQ on finding noises, and if you're having a whole lot of trouble finding the noise, Steelman chassis ear is a really great way to track down noises. You might be able to rent one from your local auto parts store. They're kind of expensive to purchase, but they're really great for tracking down hard to find noises. Outside of that, I really couldn't say what the noise is. I mean, it's without hearing it for myself or whatever, but I think you're on the right track as far as, it having something to do with the four-wheel drive. So when four-wheel drive is engaged, it's probably something up front that's happening, from the axle shaft up to the wheels. Something in there is probably having an issue. And all the things you mentioned are really good things to check. So, well done. NZ, hey Eric, love the channel. I own a 2000 Nissan Primera 160K. Rust here and there, locks work when they want. 0 to 60 in about 2 hours. Butt warmer does not work. Considering upgrading to a slightly newer German car. Please stop me. Okay, don't do it. Don't do it. Nissans can be kind of a pain to work on. Just see the video I did on an intake gasket on one of those. The timing chain video, that was fun, but I like that Nissan SER, that was fun. So in other words, I'm kind of talking up Asian vehicles because I liked working on Asian. Hondas to me are easy to work on. German cars, I actually did a video with my good friend Charles, Humble Mechanic, and we did a comparison between working on German cars versus working on Japanese cars. And I told him I liked working on Japanese cars because the amount of tools required was not nearly what it seemed to be when working on German vehicles, which Charles has been working on German vehicles long enough to know all the workarounds, all the tools he can get away with using, all that stuff. Whereas, with the Asian vehicles, I need an 8, a 10, a 12, a 14, a 17, a 19, a 32, and a 36. A few miscellaneous pliers and screwdrivers. I mean, I worked with a very small toolbox at the dealership for many, many years. Not to say I didn't require the occasional special tool. Not saying that wasn't it, but it's not like changing the oil that I needed 5 different tools to do it. So, I don't recommend used German cars. It's a personal preference kind of thing. All right, I'm going to do one last question. I'm going to go to that page 4 that I skipped and just get all random with it all right. Sketch. Eric got a 1998 Mercury Mystique 2.5 liter V6. Actually, that's a great engine. I just got it as my first car. I have a few problems. Recently, when the car started idling, it would run for 20 seconds before dropping RPM and dying. Could it be the IAC valve is choking the engine. Also, how would I identify where oil leaks are coming from? Thanks for your videos. They help a ton. Oil leaks. You want to clean the area that's suspect of where the oil leak is. That's usually a good place to start. Also, you can add dyes to the oil. And then there's a little flat, my leak kit isn't over here, it's actually over on the shelf, but there's like a whole kit. So you put dye in the oil, then you've got like a UV light that you can shine around and you can find where the leak is. But it usually starts with like cleaning the affected area. And then, you know, coming back and observing in a few miles or whatever to see if the leak is where you suspect it is. As far as it starts idling, it would drop down. Could be a problem with the IAC, possibly. 98, you might take it off and clean it, is what you might do to start with. You might take the IAC valve off, take some throttle cleaner, clean the inside of it. That could possibly give you, that could possibly fix the problem. Possibly, but I've got, once again, a whole section in the FAQ about solving idle problems that give you other things to look for in addition to what I just mentioned. Also, how to find oil leaks. So that's in there as well. And with that, I am going to close this one out. I want to once again thank you for watching and apologize for butchering your names should that happen. If you're watching this on YouTube, once again, I cannot see those comments that are posted there until well after the show is over, so I don't answer those questions. However, there is always EricTheCarGuy.com there for you. As I mentioned, the FAQ page, I'll try and link, well, I will link that in the description after the show concludes. Give me about half an hour to put all that stuff together. Let's see what else. Oh, next show is going to be in 2 weeks. I think that's, well, today's the 1st, so that would be February 15th. Huh, I might have actually done some good math this time. Yeah. And of course, repair videos and cool stuff gets posted on Fridays, and Mondays is ETCG 1. If you wish to connect with me socially, I can be found on Google+, obviously, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And I close each of my videos, including these live shows, which I want to once again thank you for watching. Be safe, have fun, stay dirty. I'll see you next time. It's going to go black now.